All right. Well, folks, we got an action-packed itinerary here, so I don't want to waste a moment, and I'd like to get started welcoming everybody for Santa Barbara Botanic Gardens Ready for Wildfire Smart Strategies for Firesafe Living Forum. This is an action-packed event. We have some great speakers, some critical content, and I can't wait to share what we have with you. But first, we have some housekeeping and introductions. So, just in terms of housekeeping, we anticipate you will have questions. We want you to have questions. We want to answer your questions. But in order to ensure all of the presentations are delivered, what we're going to do is assemble questions throughout the presentations. We will have a moderated Q&A session at the end. So with that, I'd like to get into the content here. My name is Scot Pipkin. I'm Director of Education and Engagement for Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. And for me, this forum is really a part of a really incredible process and journey. Obviously, this is a critical time for us to be having this conversation. But my first visit to Santa Barbara Botanic Garden was just a few years after Hesesita fire. And at that time, the garden was recovering from fire. And I was really impressed by the docents at the garden who were talking about the fire recovery process and talking about fire ecology and really drawing from the knowledge of the garden's long history in the region and our conservation and research program. Fast forward a few years, when I first started at this garden, it was 2018 in the wake of the Thomas fire. And I saw firsthand friends of mine in Ventura lose their homes and all of the damage and, of course, the debris flows that ensued. And again, Santa Barbara Botanic Garden was right there. And talking about wildfire recovery, what do we do in our wildlands? How do we ensure that biodiversity thrives? Since the time I've been working here, these conversations have really just ramped up. Obviously, the critical need for understanding wildfire, preparing our communities for wildfire has just increased over time. In the last few years, we've engaged with research to understand how coast live oaks might serve as a fuel break and how vegetation can actually maybe protect our communities in the face of wildfire. We're working with Santa Barbara Firesafe Council, who you'll be hearing from later in the presentation, to develop some educational materials, not just for homeowners, but also for professional gardeners and for landscape architects and designers to think about how to design and maintain landscapes that are resilient in the face of wildfire. And of course, we have this forum happening right now, which is really an outgrowth of our new impact and advocacy program. So the garden's really doubling down on being a community resource. We speak for the trees, we speak for native biodiversity, native plants at the heart of that biodiversity. And we're just thrilled to be in a conversation about something that's so near and dear to all of our hearts, so important for our communities and the sustainability of our communities moving forward. And it's great to have so many invested participants as presenters and also all of you in the community who are here. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is Supervisor Laura Capps. And I think Supervisor Capps is someone who doesn't really need introduction, but I do know that the environment is at the heart of Supervisor Capps' career. And obviously, fire, being from Santa Barbara, is something that has been top of mind for a long time. So with that, I'm going to give slide control over to Supervisor Capps and let her take it away. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for having me. When I was a kid with the name Laura, my favorite movie was The Lorax, if anyone remembers that. And so when you said I speak for the trees, that was my phrase as sort of like an 8-year-old, 9-year-old. So I'm good with that. Thank you for doing this. Thanks for putting all this together and for all the people that showed up. Wow. Santa Barbara shows up, that's what we do. We're a good community and we care. We're caretakers. And the garden is such a steward of that. unity. So thank you for this. A lot of people don't know what a supervisor does. Probably most of this crowd might, but what I like to tell people when they say, what does the supervisor do? In a nutshell, we're here to keep people safe. And so that's safety is the word. And I at the end of this, there's going to be a quiz because there is one thing that I want to impart on my very brief overview today as we kick off this panel. We are all in this together and we need to be connected. And there is one key way in which we can be connected, which I'll get to. So again, I just want to thank the Botanic Gardens. I want to thank our county fire. I want to thank our Firesafe Council. I want to thank Allen Construction. I love Dennis Allen. I love Allen Construction. I'm not at all surprised that they are a sponsor. And I want to thank all of you for showing up. And so we are here as a county to keep you safe. I want to also acknowledge a special thank you to our fire chief, Mark Hartwig. It was just announced that he will be retiring at the end of the year. I love working with Chief Hartwig. He is such a man of integrity who leads with heart and compassion. He has shown up for me in Isla Vista time and time again in so many ways. And so I want to thank him. And so we're all here out of care, out of compassion, because we know that history is such a great teacher that we're not immune to these wildfires. We know them by heart. Some of us know them very well with our homes, with our loved ones, with damage, with memories. We know the data too, that FEMA paints a stark picture that we are number one in the state and number two nationally in terms of wildfire risk. So this is not sort of a theoretical exercise in getting prepared. This is a very real need to get prepared. But we've also seen, again, just by the nature of how many people are showing up on this Zoom at 6:00, that we get prepared. So we can move to the third slide, please. Okay, so this is where I'm just giving you a heads up. The quiz might come in. If I could just impart one thing tonight that hopefully you remember at the end of this. Only 14% of our county is signed up for our critical evacuation warning alerts. That's readysbc.org. Again, that's not 44%, that's not 94%. That's 14%. And so if you could just do one thing, I imagine most folks who are probably signed up for the Zoom and participating are probably of that 14%. But if you could spread that word, put it on your social media, tell your neighbors, however you can get that word out, it's only 14%. And what we saw today, which I didn't even know was possible, that phone lines went down with Frontier and 911 is down currently. But Ready SBC is not down. We all need to be on readysbc.org. So that's my only message. That's your quiz. Hopefully by the end of this 2 hours, that's if there's one thing you say, oh, Laura Cap said, that's it. Just sign up for readysbc.org. That's all your information from the county. That's all your evacuation routes. That's all the information you need to know. So please do that, and also make sure, especially elderly folks, if they're not signed up or they can't sign up, that's the thing to let them know. And speaking of elderly folks, it's Mr. Rogers is also front of mind here when we're talking about fire safety. And I love that Anne Marie Parkinson is on this Zoom today because she runs a wonderful organization called the Firesafe Council. We know that when it comes to emergencies, that is great as our first responders are, and they are amazing. I love working with them every day. I honor them, their courage. We are more likely to be alerted and saved in the time of a true disaster by our neighbor than anybody else. So actually, the data shows that we're 2 to 5 times more likely to be helped by somebody we know. So another secondary message I have for you is to just reach out to a neighbor. Get to know the person to the left or right of you on your block, especially, again, if they're elderly, if they might not be somebody that could evacuate quickly. That is a really important thing to do. We saw that again with the Palisade and Eaton fires, that is a very smart and easy thing that we all can do to get prepared. We're going to hear a lot of details, a lot of really smart things about wildfire, about how it travels, about home hardening. But I'm sort of doing the people element because that's where my expertise lies, and my where just in terms of communications. And just again, sign up for Ready SBC and get to know your neighbor, and just share a text, put a little note in their mailbox. You just never know what that might produce down the line and what that might prevent. And that's really my message. We also, and on my last slide, we have a QR code, thanks to my wonderful team, Eleanor, who's part of this Zoom. We have a newsletter. We put out a lot of information. We've been putting out information today about the 911 information going down. So we encourage you. Many of you are signed up. We love to be in touch. We learn a lot from you. We share a lot of information. But again, time to prepare, and you're going to hear a lot of that, is before the smoke is on the horizon. So I just want to, again, inspired by the numbers of people, I see them signing up by the second here, by joining tonight's discussion, staying informed and being engaged. It's really what the heart of Santa Barbara is all about, and what will save us and help us continue through this disaster and really the new normal in this era of extreme climate events. So thanks to the garden. I love going up there, and I think I'm going to have to save this as my Zoom background, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Supervisor Capps. That's great information. 14%. That's we can do better.
We can do better.
raise
We
that
can
a
be
little bit.
100%.
That's right. I'm signed up for Ready SBC. I'll just say
All right.
for my part. Yeah. So we got 279 people in the room right now. Ask yourself, are you signed up for Ready SBC? And if not, you should be. So we're going to move along, and next I'm pleased to introduce Captain Chris Olmstead. And if my sleuthing is correct, Captain Olmstead has been doing this for around 27 years. And if that is correct, I went on the county's fire dashboard and I was looking up how many fires of 10 acres or greater have been in Santa Barbara County during those 27 years. It's almost 350 fires. So Captain Olmstead has probably seen it all. And I'm really excited to hear a little more from the firefighters' perspective, how we can protect our community. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Captain Chris Olmstead.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yes, it has been 27 years since I've been on the department. It's been a long haul, and it's been a good career throughout the time. Of that, I'm a current fire captain with the Santa Barbara County Fire Department. This is just me at one of the fires. I believe this is down south Santa Paula area of a fire. I want to say it was probably during Christmas time, but it was a few years back. So I've been a captain. I'm a current captain with the Santa Barbara County Fire Department. I've been on 27 years, having responded to tons of various types of incidents, including tons of wildland fires, regular structure fires, vehicle fires, medicals. I'm a paramedic. And then also, too, during my time working on the department, I went back to school, got my master's in fire protection engineering and my California license as a as a professional engineer in fire protection engineering. So I'm glad we're coming together with this presentation. I think it's important for the community as a whole to get a better grasp on what's out there and what they can do and get a better understanding. The more you participate, the more prepared you'll be. So hopefully we can talk about that and get some questions answered and get you more prepared for the next event. So when we look at fires in California, specifically in Southern California, all large fires that we deal with, even throughout, they're associated with a significant wind events. You add into, specifically in this area, steep terrain, dry fuels from prolonged drought, with hot and dry climate. It's a recipe for disaster, and we've seen that in our own communities, and as it currently down back in January down in Los Angeles areas. A lot of these significant winds are pushed by what we all have heard of Santa Ana's down south, or specific to the Santa Barbara area is the Sundarana winds. Sundarana winds is a local wind condition associated with strong, gusty, and dry winds that typically occur in the late afternoon or early evening, hence sunset time, or the name comes from. They produce rapid temperature rises, decrease relative humidities, strong down canyon and offshore winds that can reach up to gale forces. It is associated with a high pressure that develops in the north, creating a pressure gradient really between the Central Valley and the coast. And it's what's been the push of most of our significant fires inside the South Santa Barbara County, the Painted Cave Fire, the Hesacita Fire, the Key Fire, all the Holiday Fire, all associated with Sundarana winds. So what do we face as firefighters when we respond to these significant fires? These types of fires have produced dangerous conditions for both the public and the firefighters responding. During the main push or the fire growth portion of the time where it's really expanding into the communities, firefighters can expect to be impacted by high heat, low visibility or visibility issues, large ember cast, and all that. Also, with the smoke and the ember, it makes it difficult for fresh air and causes breathing problems. It's all, produces chaotic environments with possible rescues that need to occur from occupants not evacuating, or like you saw down in Lahaina, where people had to jump in the ocean just because of the fast growing impact associated with these wind event fires. This also impacts and causes poor radio communications, and the lack, with the strong winds and poor visibility, the lack of really relying on, or the ability of aircraft to be used in support roles for recurrent drops or even water or safety lookouts. And add on to that is the typical fire shift is a 24-hour on the fire line, multiple days. And when we have these fast growing events, several years ago, when I responded down to the Woolsey fire, which has impacted Los Angeles all the way down to the coastline into Malibu area, I was on the fire line with my crew for over 72 hours with very limited rest. So they all have an impact associated with how we can perform. We look into the effects of smoke, and here's a list of what we have and what it causes. Again, the low visibility, it makes it hard to see and do things. It causes chaos among civilians and the people leaving the area, and it really increases the amount of exposure to carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, which all have long-term effects. And again, it reduces the ability of use of aircraft. This is a fire taken during the Thomas Fire, and this is actually in Santa Barbara, looking out at the smoke being produced. So this is a local phenomenon, as we all know. And the big key is really trying to alleviate and get the community to evacuate as soon as they can. So early evacuation. So back in the 1970s, we had a large-scale fire that was associated down in Laguna area that burned 175,000 acres, destroyed over 1,300 structures, 382 of those being homes. And in the ashes of that fire, several fire agencies, as you see, Santa Barbara County Fire was one of the founding members, came together with the want to increase our ability to manage and control these types of incidents. Hence, the Firescope was developed. And now what Firescope has done is, as an organization made up of multiple fire agencies, which include more than what the founding members are now, they support the development of safe firefighting, incident management, and guidelines as far as strategic ability and tactics associated with these wildland fire. And it also set up and it started the incident command system, which is used today by most public agencies. In fact, using the ICS system is mandated by the feds in order to get federal funding, and it's a proven thing to work. And why I bring this in is this allows multiple agencies to work together that don't typically, say, law enforcement, fire, volunteer groups, and it all sets up a common terminology, common communication, and really gives that ability to run an incident. So this all comes up because this is how we, as firefighters, start to look at, and we use their guidelines for structure triage. So this is what we do when I show up in the engine to say, how am I going to defend your structure? It all has to do with mainly these three triage effects. Is it a defensible property that I can maybe do a little bit of prep and hold it, and it has a high likelihood of surviving? Or if someone's done really good defensible space requirements and they're non-combustible exterior, is it really a standalone where really I don't have to do much, maybe come back occasionally to monitor and make sure something hasn't changed? Or really we get into the non-defendable, where really all we're doing is, if someone's there, we're going to try to rescue them. And the pictures really show some of the contrast of what we're looking at is the non-combustible sightings, the overgrowth, and that. And really to sort of emphasize is me coming on as a supervisor, as a captain of a fire engine, how much harm do I want to put my crew in? We have a saying is we risk a lot to save a lot, and that's usually for life, but we risk very little. I don't want to put my people in harm's way for something, especially if it's a non-defendable structure. And then as we further get into what Firescope also does, is it really gets into, and this is more so of some of the tactics that we use in fighting wildland fires, and just showing mainly the organization of how we use our tactics depending on the situation. Really looking at, we might not just station up at a house and defend it. It might be something like, you might see us leaving one area, go to another area. It's all part of a tactical approach in trying to do the best with the resources that we have. On a little side note, this was my crew, my engineer and firefighter during the Woolsey fire down in the Los Angeles area, and the effects that you could see, the smoke, the poor visibility, and really trying to keep a structure fire from burning into another house. So we get into evacuation and the problems associated with that, and really looking at like late evacuations. When you know something is coming, you should make every effort to leave. We get into, and this picture really was taken from the internet, but it shows this is post a dozer coming by and pushing all the stalled and left vehicles out of the way so that the fire engines could pass. So really looking at late evacuations really equate to blocked and really evacuations and really trying to get us out. Really looking at saying, okay, one of the things too is we want to make sure that we can identify with addressing being displayed, lock gates and those types of things. We're looking at further going into associations with what you can do as owners to help out with this is really looking at know your evacuations, do the pre-planning associated with what you need. Don't just have one way that you know about. Have it pre-mapped out in case one way gets blocked, that you have an additional way out. Maintain your clearance so that the fire engines can get up into your driveways, and then we can evacuate. If you have elderly neighbors or elderly parents or disabled people, help them out and really concentrate on giving them out and really looking at supervisor caps again saying really go to readysbc.org and sign up for alerts. You could also go to County Fire website at sbcfire.com and really look at, we have additional information that you can use to help push you out, and that would be on the public information drop down. So how do you as residents, property owners, occupants really get into those two first categories into defensible, minor prep, or standalone, is really looking at our zones of clearance. And we've started looking at classifying these as zone 0, zone 1, zone 2. And we're really looking at that zone 0 being the first 5 feet from the structure, really having no combustibles at all, including wooden fences and stuff. We've seen from videos, and I think I have a video coming up soon, showing that when you have fences and combustible items, it's really an amber collection that allows a candle wicking to burn and catch your house on fire. So we really start to use our construction features, our vegetation clearance, keeping it really in limiting our fuel impact. Again, these are going into the next slide coming up is looking at our defensible space and maintaining really our defensible space, our home hardening, keeping access clear, and unobstructed, visible addressing, and then again, evacuating early, looking at our water sources and making sure that we don't want to just turn on a fire sprinkler and leave it for days thinking that that's going to help, because it really starts to draw down water and you see that effect with some of those fires down in Los Angeles in January, where the water system just couldn't handle the extreme loss of water. This next slide is really looking at this is a picture I took up at the fire. I was up in Santa Cruz area and really looking at like the contrast of, is this really a defendable structure or is this more of a non-defendable? How much hazard am I going to put my crew in for this? Let's see if I get this to play. I had a video queued up, and this is really going in, and you can do a search on YouTube for this video, and I apologize for not being able to play it, but it really shows the contrast here of showing a home harden with our zone 0, and then the contrast. Oh, hey, here it goes. It might be playing. Oh, there. See, here we go with this and showing. And these fans are set up to show the amber cast and the strong winds that can come. And you're really looking at the close vegetation, not having the mulch around the house. That's because that's really a receptive bed for embers. And you see, again, now the fence is catching fire, and that's transitioning into the house, into the structure where it was a metal fence, so it didn't allow that. And we really look at how that transitions. and just really looking at it. It is a joint effort between the firefighters, us, and the community in making sure that everyone is safe and can manage these large scale incidents with hopefully limited to no injuries, and then also to trying to limit our property damage. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Captain Olmstead. Definitely, I appreciate the first responder firefighter's perspective. Somebody recently said in a conversation that defensible is a two-sided coin. On the one hand, we're thinking about property and our valuable possessions, but on the other hand, we're thinking about the personnel. And it's really important for us to have our firefighters in mind as we're managing our landscapes.
Thank you. Yes, I agree.
So now I'd like to introduce Matthew Caligiure, who represents Allen Construction. And I have to say, Matthew is part of the impetus for this forum. So Matthew reached out early in the year in the wake of the fires in Los Angeles and was asking me, because we have a little bit of a personal relationship, what can we do? How can we work together? How can we get some of these messages out to the community so that we are preventing more devastating fires in Santa Barbara? And so I'd really like to thank Matthew for reaching out and being part of the impetus for this whole thing. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matthew, who's got some information about home hardening.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, everyone. It's a great honor to be on the forum, and really neat. Yeah, after in the wake of the recent fires in LA, at Allen Construction, we were putting a little guide, a community resource guide together, a home hardening guide, and then I realized other entities, other community organizations were doing the same thing, and so I reached out to Scott, and I thought, well, we should be combining our resources and our powers and our efforts on this. So it's a real treat for me to be on this panel. It's it's a topic I care deeply about, and our company, Allen Construction, cares deeply about. And so just happy to be able to provide a little bit of a builder's perspective, specific to the hardening of the structure of the home in particular. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go here. So a little bit about me before we kick off on some of the specifics. I am about 15 years with Allen Construction. I started in construction in my young 20s. I couldn't have imagined that I'd kind of be exposed to so much natural disaster so quickly as a young building professional. But I have, and here we are, and we've all lived through it. And so I've gotten the chance to wear a lot of different hats along the way: laborer, carpenter, superintendent, project manager, employee owner, and now I'm vice president of production here at Allen, and it's a topic we care deeply about. So, so some of the experience I've had in building homes in Montecito and high fire areas of Santa Barbara, Ojai, it's contributing to my perspective and kind of my passion around this topic. And many of you know Dennis Allen, who founded the company 40 years ago. Many of you know Ian Cronshaw, and those guys are kind of the old guard, the visionaries of our company. But now you know me, right? Now you know another local builder representing, our company. And it's not just a passion of those guys; it's a passion of me and my colleagues and my fellow employee owners. It's a topic we really do know quite a bit about, and we're going to talk a bit more about that as we go. And I just do want to mention too, I love the garden. Been a member at the Botanic Garden for many years with my children, and I have a deep appreciation for our chaparral and our forest and our local ecosystems too. So I might not have the Ph.D. Or all the certifications of some of the other panelists here, but I have the deep care and passion, and I'm happy to share that too. Some of you might know me from Instagram. I have got a page that I share different kind of musings and videos from the backcountry that I take. But let's jump into it here. So objectives for the next few minutes for me are to talk briefly about the role of the builder. Why am I even on this call? Why is this important? Why do you need to collaborate with a builder for your renovation or for your upgrading of your homes in this regard? Why is that important? And what do you need from your builder? What should you expect from your builder? We should talk about that. Next bullet point is we're going to spend a few minutes just talking about a checklist, a home hardening checklist specific to structures. What's the most bang for your buck? What is the low hanging fruit that you can take care of now, that you should take care of now? And how can we help you with that? How can another builder in this town help you with that? Hopefully it's us, but there's a lot to do. So yeah, we'll talk about what works. And this is something we share with our team, our carpenters and our superintendents is think like an ember. What is an ember going to do in a situation as you walk around your house? That should inform, I think, really inform kind of what you do first if you're going to do any home hardening. And then I do want to bring up a case study, a house on Tunnel Road, and it's an interesting story that kind of intertwines proximity to the Botanic Garden, Mission Canyon, and it's got an interesting story along the way there. So I'll touch on that as well, and hopefully some time at the end for some questions. So I should be able to move through this pretty succinctly here, and then I'll give some resources and final thoughts as well. And this picture is neat. This is the Hesacita fire from Upper Montecito. It's just a matter of time before we see a scene like this again, unfortunately, somewhere in our neck of the woods. So I found this old photo from 2009 and wanted it to be part of this because it's very much part of our conversation here. Okay, so just briefly, what is the role of a builder in home hardening? And like I said before, I'm not a fire scientist. I don't have a degree in fire behavior. I don't have those certifications, but I do have, and I have had the privilege, we have had the privilege of kind of being a boots on the ground resource for people in Santa Barbara County, Ventura County as well. And we know what works. We've had time in the game, we've had time on the ground. And when it comes to some of these home hardening techniques or methods, we really do know what works. We've seen it with our own eyes. And we have the benefit of that. I want to share some of that now. But we've also had time in the game, like I said, and been in dialogue with the fire department over the years. The fire department inspects our jobs and reviews plans and before permitting is issued. So we've had a kind of a long, kind of meandering dialogue with the fire department over the last 20, 30, 40 years even. And it's a privilege to be part of that conversation as well. And so we've got some feedback there. And yeah, we're builders. We're builders. We aren't developers. I think there's a distinction that needs to be made. Like we are, a Santa Barbara builder. We focus on homes, healthy homes, resilient homes. We work directly with homeowners. We're not trying to develop. We don't have a lot of that in Santa Barbara in our region. We don't have a lot of developers trying to build 1,000 homes, and there's really no commercial interest. It's all kind of public and neighborly interest. So, we want to be able to bring that level of expertise to our builds, and you all as homeowners should be expecting that your builder is well versed in the kind of the fundamentals of FireWise strategy. And so building is complex. It really is. There's a lot that a builder needs to bring to the table. We could talk, that's a whole nother presentation, but we do need to expect our builders in this town at the upper echelon to know how to manage the home hardening conversation as well, or at least contribute to it. So that's what we're trying to bring. So how do we do that? How do we kind of instigate good practice, good hardening practice on our properties, on our homes? So we're going to talk about these 4 or 5 kind of quick concepts over the next few slides. We're going to talk about vents and eaves. We're going to talk about roofing and gutters. We've got kind of cladding or siding, exterior walls to get into briefly. Windows and doors is a big one. And then finally, decks, patios, and kind of adjacent fencing, which we've already mentioned briefly. Captain Olmstead mentioned that, but we'll talk about it briefly here too. So let's see. Let's start with vents and eaves. I wanted this to be at the top of the list, and for good reason. So, first bullet point, you can see in this picture, this is a big gable vent, and it's very recognizable, right? We could drive through any neighborhood in Santa Barbara or Ventura, Carpinteria, and almost all of our homes are going to have these big gable vents or these big kind of eave vents that we see. And so we'll touch on that in a second a little bit more. But installing 1/8 of an inch metal mesh screen on all vents is probably it's probably the single most important method or mechanism that I can share tonight. And it's a community one too. It's like if you can't do it yourself, you can hire a handyman, you can hire a builder, you can probably hire the neighbor kid to your right or left or across the street. You might be able to hire ask your nephew or your niece to do it. This is one that is low hanging fruit. And so, maybe someone in the chat can update this here, but quarter-inch mesh comes standard on a lot of these vents off the shelf, and quarter-inch mesh is there to keep rodents out primarily. But what we're talking about is ember control here, and it's paramount. And so we have to scale back down to 1/8 of an inch, and that's going to do a better job of keeping a flying ember from flying directly into your attic space or your crawl space. And so again, it's ember control here. So we'll come back to this in a second, but the next one is if you are doing a project, if you are doing a renovation or a remodel or new building, and especially if you're in the wild and urban interface, make sure you're using some of the niftier new vents, the Vulcan vents, that are going to be, especially manufactured and made to control ember, especially in a high wind environment, severely exposed locations. And then this is another one. Scott, maybe you can just trace the cursor along the roof line there where the eaves are. Yeah, so when we say eaves or soffits, we want to be able to, as good practice, enclose those eaves so that embers can't get blown up and stuck into the little crevices of your eaves or of your roof line. So that's good practice as well. Why does any of this matter? Let's go to the next bullet. Because when embers are being driven by extremely high winds, they can easily enter your attic, especially your attic or your soffit or your foundation crawl space vents. So, Scott, just click through the next 10 pictures that I added. But I just grabbed these screenshots from Google Street View. These are our neighborhoods in Santa Barbara, and they all have these big vents. It's all something we've seen before. So please, take care of the vents. Take care of the vents. I think that's the number one thing. If you have questions around that, call me. Call your handyman. It's something you got to do right away. All right, let's talk about roofing really briefly too. So this one is, maybe this goes without saying, and it's kind of a code minimum for building in Santa Barbara, but we've got to utilize Class A roofing. Class A roofing, non-combustible material, tile, shingles, metal roofing. Believe it or not, there's still some homes around Santa Barbara that have wood shingles or some type of roofing that isn't going to hold up for very long in a fire. So if you have the opportunity to update your roof, it's got to be Class A material. And there's a lot of great reputable roofers in town that can help you select a product or get you sorted out. It's an investment, obviously, but it's critical. Again, thinking like an ember, sealing gaps up with caulking or metal flashing. Where you've got your roof or your wall connections, Don't allow big gaps to be a place where an ember is going to gather. Yeah, right. Code, I see in the chat, code minimums, right? Code minimums are going to be changing, but um, until they really do and they're really enforced, we've got to be kind of ahead of the best practice. And then this is a low hanging fruit as well, but we need to collectively keep our gutters and our roof lines free of dry vegetation. That stuff's it's just kindling basically. So set yourself a reminder. Again, this is just a thing you could maybe hire the neighbor kid to do, clean your gutters out, get your niece or nephew to do it, your grandson, your grandkid, granddaughter. But it's got to be done. It's got to be done regularly, and it's easy. You just got to set a reminder and get it done. So yeah, this is, I don't know if the video will play, but this matters because embers can land on and ignite roofs. I think this is a little video clip from Altadena. 90, 100 mile an hour winds. It's a total candlestick, just getting embers blown everywhere. And that's going to happen here. Fire, right, is part of our environment and it has been for millennia. And we need to harden our structures to control those embers. All right, we'll keep moving here. Next one, siding, exterior walls, what we choose to use as cladding for our structures. Right, we want to choose, if we have the opportunity to choose, non-combustible cladding or siding. And so a lot of times that's stucco, great. Sometimes it's metal siding. I have a couple pictures later on about a metal kind of cladded siding. It could be fiber cement or hardy board. If you're going to make an upgrade, choose hardy board over T111 or some wood paneling that you could get off the shelf. So it's an important part of the checklist, and it's an investment. I recognize that some of these things are costly to do, and not everyone can just snap their fingers and make the adjustment. But it's important, and that's a good practice as well. So non-combustible siding. I mentioned this on the other slide too, but reducing with flashings, reducing gaps in the siding or the trim connections. Yep. And then metal flashings, like we've been saying. So just trying to create like a really tight exterior wall assembly. I could talk about that for hours, but siding in particular, can ignite, and we've got to make sure our exterior cladding is ready to withstand the ember storm or the flames. So let's keep moving, Scott. Yeah, that's my coworker pointing to some hardy siding. Windows and doors. This is another one that I wouldn't say is low hanging fruit, but if your home needs new windows and doors, and you don't have tempered dual pane panels, then that could be a real risk for your structure, especially if you're on the wildland urban interface. So if you're going to be investing in new windows and doors, dual pane and tempered glass is critical. Tempered glass panel on the exterior side, and any professional that you're going to be working with will likely guide you in that direction, and that'll be part of a new window and door package, or a couple of new windows and doors if you're going to do that. Metal frame, treated wood frame, extruded aluminum is great. So aluminum clad new windows and doors, we see that a lot, and that's that's good practice as well. A lot of us, myself included, have like a hollow core door on the exterior of their home. Maybe it's a back door or a garage door or something like that, but a hollow core door will not resist heat or fire, flame for very long. So that's another little tidbit that you may or may not want to address on your home sooner than later. And then this one's maybe a little extreme, but it's I've seen it work. Fire shutters, especially if you're in a highly exposed area. I have a picture of that, 2 pictures from now here, Scott. Yeah, so a good professional. These are some of my coworkers. they're going to take care to install windows correctly and make sure you've got the right product if you're going to be changing out your windows. And in here, this picture is pretty cool. This house actually survived the Thomas fire, and it's got significant kind of shutter apparatus and screening because the owner, the architect, really did want to kind of go above and beyond to prepare for wildfire. And in this case, the structure made it through the Thomas fire. That was a pretty cool case study for us. So yeah, let's keep moving. Okay, interesting one here, and this is the last of the kind of specific checklist topics. Decks, patios, fencing. Again, we want to kind of choose Class A rated materials because those materials won't combust right away. They've got a time rating and a thickness that's going to keep them from combusting. We'll come back to this picture in a second here. This is one we could probably all relate with if we've got a deck and we put a bunch of stuff under it, firewood, debris, an old propane tank, you name it. So, let's not use those areas as storage for some items that could combust or contribute to a fire around your structure. So that's good practice. Yeah, and then utilizing non-combustible fencing and gates if possible in the zone 0, kind of the closest proximity to the structure, which I know is different than what this picture is showing, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So look at this house. This house actually has a lot of neat features. It has a lot of good fire hardened features on it. It's got stucco siding, cladding. It's got aluminum clad windows. It's got fascia that's made out of metal and integrated gutter. There's no exposed wood on the roof line. But what does it have? What does seem like a real weak spot, right? It's got this kind of wood fencing, balcony fencing. So let's move on to the next slide, Scott. This is kind of going to give way to our little case study, kind of quick, fun, interesting case study here. So this is the same house. This is Dennis Allen's house. He built this up in Mission Canyon in the 80s. And this structure is on Tunnel Road, and it's about 300 yards from the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. So it's cool. It's close, and it ties in with the proximity to the garden and my company and history there. And like I said, it's got these really pretty neat kind of fire wise features that Dennis, he described himself as a nutty builder out in the 80s, and he was he was just kind of taking some risks and deciding like, hey, if I'm going to build up here, then I'm going to use some of these best practice methods that people were talking about at the time. So Scott, click through some of these bullet points. Like I said, Tunnel Road, Mission Canyon, high fire, 40 years ago almost, right? And these folks were able to kind of integrate home hardening into their structure. But when I talked to Dennis about this last week, I was refreshing with him. He knew that they had one main weakness, and it was this kind of wood cladded fencing that you can see in the pictures. I think I got a little lag on the pictures, but the cool part about this is the home made it through the fire, the Hesesita fire in 2009, and unfortunately, the neighboring homes didn't. But the hardening that they opted to do really was the reason why the house made it through. However, the wood fencing did start to burn, and it did combust. And it was lucky that there was some Forest Service fire personnel up Tunnel Road, and they were surveying, and they had realized that, oh, this home didn't burn yet, but it's going to burn. It is burning. This fencing is burning, but the hardening elements of this house bought enough time for those firefighters to respond, put the fire out along the fence line here, and fortunately, this home made it through when a few other surrounding ones, unfortunately, didn't. So it's really interesting to kind of look back and see what methodology worked, why it mattered, And then next slide is, it was something that they fixed right away as soon as they kind of got back into residency there on Tunnel Road. You can see where they made the adjustment with the stucco and added that, kind of retrofitted that later, and did away with that wood motif that they wanted to keep in originally. So, poignant stuff in a high fire neighborhood, and it just so happens to be connected to me personally and a founder of our company, a coworker that I think a lot of us have great respect for. But when it comes down to it, there was a weakness there, and they didn't take care of it. And so I think that's one of the closing thoughts for me here is, if you know you have a weakness, we can keep going, Scott. If you know you have a weakness and you have the time and the means to address it now, do it now. And if you need help with that, come to me or come to another community resource that can provide a little coaching or a little clarification. It's something we care a lot about, and we can't afford to wait. There's a lot of hardening still needed in our town. And I feel like it's a community effort to get there. So let's keep going, Scott. I got a couple little closing thoughts, and then I can give way to our next speaker. If you know you have a weakness, don't live with it. I think that's the important takeaway. Let's do what we can to kind of address those things now, before the next Santa Ana event, before the next fire, which inevitably we will see. I think it's about every 10 years, right, that we see, on average, right, that we see a fire event. And we tend to kind of get forgetful really quickly. And so we've got to kind of shake ourselves loose here and support each other. I think that's why events like this are so important, that we've got great reminders, we've got great community resources, we can be good neighbors. We have to be good neighbors. And that's why community entities like the Garden and Santa Barbara County Firesafe Council and our company and other great builders around town can contribute to the hardening efforts. We really care about it, and means a lot to us to kind of hold that position. You all can come back to this if you like, but these were some resources that I like to use, and a couple books there at the bottom that really informed a lot of kind of my thinking around hardening and fire in Southern California in general. So I'm happy to talk more about all of this. Get in touch with me somehow on the side if you want to keep the conversation about your neighborhood or your particular structure going. And thank you so much for the opportunity, and I appreciate everybody on the call and the leadership here by the Garden. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And it's great to know that there are some pretty easy things we can do that will make a huge difference. And the questions were flying in. So when we get to our Q&A, I'm sure there's going to be a lot for you to chew on there, Matthew. But in the interest of time, we're going to keep it moving. And I'd like to introduce my boss, Dr. Steve Windhager, Executive Director for Santa Barbara Botanic Garden.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking time. I'm going to sort of try to get us caught back up in terms of time. But we're going to start with what we've already heard today is a reminder that home hardening is where you should start with this conversation. Most houses burn from the inside out. Embers get into those homes, and that's how they combust. So again, the two cheapest things you can do are probably singly the most effective things you can do, which is that 1/8-inch screening and cleaning your eaves. Like Matthew said, that's going to go a long way to making you safer. And get those things done. Convert your fence from something that's wood, at least within the first 5 feet of your homes. And then also move your gas, your other similar flammable materials away from your home. That's going to make the largest difference of anything you can do. When it comes to starting to think about what you can do in your landscape, we have a phrase here we use a lot, which is the idea that we should be planting with purpose. And what that means here at the Garden is thinking about that your garden should be much more than just decoration. It should be a space that provides comfort. It's an extension of your home here in Santa Barbara, where we live outside most of the year. But it's also a really critical need for us to think about using our landscapes as part of our home defense, as well as part of giving home to other species, making sure that your home can be part of helping support the biodiversity that's so critical to this region. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that now. One of the things that we're encouraging is to make sure that the areas that we live, work, and play have at least 30% native plants. The reason we're trying to get to 30% native plants is that we've seen that when native plant species drop below 30% of the cover, biodiversity just drops really radically. We've seen that in some cases, about 90%, 90 to 95% of bird species feed insects to their young. And if they don't have those insects to harvest off of native plants, you're going to see a reduced success in your songbirds and other birds being able to support their young in the landscape. Additionally, the wonderful butterflies and moths that we have here in Santa Barbara, they need at least 15% high quality habitat in order to disperse. When you start thinking about half of our landscape in the urban area is made up of roads and other hardscape houses, those butterflies need at least 30% in those few areas that still are green in order to be able to effectively move through the area. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about our landscapes can be more than just beautiful. They can also be part of providing habitat for wildlife. We're going to talk how they can also be part of home protection as well. So the key thing, and you've heard this already, as we think about defensible space around your home, a big part of that defensible space is ensuring that firefighters can safely enter that space and save your home. It needs to be something that they feel like they can not risk their lives, but drag hoses through, get up close to, and provide that defense of your home. So a lot of the guidelines that we have for that defensible space is as much about making sure firefighters will be safe as it is about actually keeping embers out of your home. And oftentimes, the embers are less of an issue. So the zones that we've heard about today, we've already talked about zone 0. The state is still working on this. They talk about having no highly flammable things in that first 5 feet around your home. That does not mean you could not have a tree in that zone, but it needs to be well limbed up. It needs to be well maintained, but the trunk of that tree is probably not going to be a highly combustible part of your landscape. And so oftentimes that zone 0 can include some trees, but it would not include a lot of shrubs and other bushes that are going to be catching leaves and other debris that's actually going to accumulate around your house and actually cause a problem. As you saw in that short video, mulch, wood mulch is oftentimes one of the real problems up against your house because embers will land there, catch the mulch on fire, and then it catches other things on fire. So you want to keep this, you want to use mineral mulch or other ways in that zone 0. But again, a lot of what you need to do in zone 0 is about maintenance. The leaves that blow up against your house, you need to remove those on a regular basis. You need to make sure any vegetation that is going to be in that area, whether it's a tree or a potted plant or whatever else, is well hydrated so that it's not likely to catch on fire. As you move out from that zone 0, you're getting into what's called zone 1, which is 5 feet to 30 feet out. This is area that Cal Fire talks about lean, clean, and green. You do want to keep, this is a great area to have a lawn if you're going to have it, but you definitely want to keep the plants in this area hydrated. But you also, not just irrigating them, you really need to maintain them by trimming off dead material on a regular basis. When you have some of your larger shrubs in that area. You want to make sure they're not directly underneath your trees. We want to keep them isolated from other things. So here's where you want to disconnect some of the plants in your landscape so they're not bumping one into the other, so that you don't get one plant to finally ignite, only to ignite all the rest of the plants in your landscape. So that zone 1, 5 feet to 30 feet from around your home, should be irrigated, should be well-spaced trees, and try to keep the plants in your landscape from touching each other to the extent that you can. And again, avoid layering plants in this. It's one thing to have a ground cover underneath the branches of a tree, but you don't want to have taller shrubs that are going to be reaching up and getting within a few feet of those branches from the overhanging trees. Always keep this area removing pine leaves, needles, all that stuff needs to be kept clean. As you move out further, 30 feet beyond your home, out to about 100 feet, this is the area where you can just talk about reduced fuel. You want to make sure to remove dead grass as it dies back at the end of the year, remove any dead material from trees. And it's still a good idea to create some separation between plantings and any flammable materials. So if you have a firewood pile, you don't want to put that firewood pile directly underneath a tree. You don't want to have an arbor that's directly underneath the tree if that's going to lead to those trees possibly catching on fire. But here you can have the trees a little more closely together so that their canopies begin to touch, but you don't want to have a lot of material underneath that's going to catch those canopies on fire. So definitely try to find that separation between there. And here you can have mulch and fallen leaves in the landscape, but the goal is to have leaves no deeper than 3 inches in your landscape. So you can use leaves and bark mulch as a mulching material in zone 2. And then finally, what is called, it's not depicted in this image, but zone 3, and that's your access way. You want to have at least a driveway that's 12 feet wide so that your fire trucks can get in there safely. But really beyond that, you want to have about 10 foot of clearance beyond the edges of your driveway. That doesn't mean no plants, but it does mean that you don't have a hedged wall along either side of your 10-foot wide driveway. That's not going to make a fire department feel comfortable driving into this. So you want to move those things back a little bit or have individual plants that aren't going to be catching each other on fire. Because you're never going to get that fire truck to drive up your driveway through a wall of fire burning on either side. So now we start thinking about plant selection. This is definitely the part where the garden's really becoming increasingly an expert. We've been working with the Firewise communities and really looking at the Santa Barbara Firesafe Council and the county fire and the city fire folks to really help design and figure out what are the characteristics that cause plants most likely to catch on fire, and what are the ways that we can select which the right plants to put into our landscape to reduce problem species. Now, again, not all plants are equally flammable. Some are much more flammable than others, but in all truth, all plants can burn under the right conditions. Doesn't matter if it's cactus or an oak tree. Eventually, with enough fire put on it, and under the right circumstances, everything will combust. But some plants are less likely to do so than others. And as we've said before, definitely consider native plants as part of the benefits of biodiversity in your landscape. So one thing that came up in the chat already I saw was questions about oak trees. Oak trees have been seen by firefighters and others to actually catch embers in fire conditions. And so they actually can be a shield for your home. The good news about coast live oaks is they make a great fire shield, but you do have to make sure anything you want to keep them trimmed back as much as possible from overhanging your house, more like surrounding your house as a shield rather than overhanging. And when they do overhang, just be aware, oak trees drop leaves year round. They don't drop a ton at any given time, but they're constantly dropping leaves. And that means you're constantly needing to go up and clean out those gutters or finding a way to keep the leaves from accumulating in your gutters in the first place. I know Matthew can help you install things on top of your gutters to keep those things from happening as well. But so think about that as part of your process here. But oak trees are a great choice in your landscape. Avoid, if possible, plants that have great smells. Honestly, these are wonderful plants, but anything like your salvias, your sages, your eucalyptus, many other species, that great smell that you smell when you crush the leaves or anything else, it is actually a volatile organic compound. And what they mean by volatile is that they can actually burn. And so those plants are more likely to catch on fire and burn hotter than other things. If you want to have these plants in your landscape, this is a great way to do it. Keep it as an isolated mass and don't put other plants around it, because that plant probably will catch on fire as those embers come into your landscape. And the key is to make sure that it's not going to catch other plants in your land or your home on fire itself. Plants that have these kind of wonderful smells are horrible plants to put around your home itself. Put them out in that 30, 40 feet beyond your house if possible. Also want to avoid plants that keep a lot of dead material in the canopy. Some trees like cypress and juniper, they will often keep dead branches and dead needles on the tree for up to several years if a branch dies. So you want to go in and thin that out, remove all that dead material on a regular basis. It's not enough just to let it sit there, even if it's far away from your house, because that is a definite fire risk. If you have a plant in your landscape that has dense foliage, particularly with fine feathery leaves, that also makes it very easy to ignite. So if you're going to have a plant like this in your landscape, put it pretty far away from your home, or better yet, don't install it in the first place. These can be very pretty, but they are a real problem when it comes to a combustible part in your landscape. Finally, also think about avoiding trees that have loose bark, particularly the shedding bark that will be falling onto the ground around it. If it does have that shedding bark, you need to clean that up more frequently. The bark is actually worse than just the leaf accumulation. It's more likely to combust and catch on fire and then carry that fire towards your home. The better choice is to not plant the tree at all, but if you've already got one of those trees before you cut it down, there are maintenance that you can do to pull that material off before you have a fire, and so it will reduce your fire risk. But it does increase anytime you have one of these plants that is not an ideal, that has characteristics that make it more of a fire risk, you're just going to increase your maintenance requirements in the landscape. Now, what are some of my favorite trees that we'd want, or favorite plants to recommend? So again, the first tree that I'd recommend is the coast live oak. It is by far both fire. It is beneficial for your home landscape to actually shield you from embers, but it's also very slow to ignite. So even if it doesn't help your home survive, it's going to be very slow to actually ignite in your landscape, providing a lot of shade and a lot of other benefits, not just to you, but to other species. We've seen that there are over 500 species of insects that make coast live oak their home, and therefore it provides the best single plant in Southern California for habitat value. Another favorite of mine is the lemonade berry. This is a very versatile shrub. It can be hedged. It can be pruned back. This is an example of us pruning it back to about 3 feet tall on a slope. And that is very slow to ignite. In fact, Max Moritz and his lab at UCSB have done combustion studies, and they actually cannot get this plant to burn in a combustion chamber. So that suggests that it's a very good plant to have in your landscape, even if you're using it as a mass, but don't put it right next to the road. Don't put it right next to your entry. Pull it back a little bit. If you are going to put it in those locations, keep it trimmed back so that it is going to be able to provide that habitat value, but not get too tall and be ladder fuel. If you want to let it get tall, these can get easily 8 to 12 feet tall. Don't put it underneath another tree, because it becomes a tree all of itself and is amazing ladder fuel if it does actually eventually combust. Another great one, Coral Bells heuchera is another name for this. It comes in whites and purples and blues and pinks. So it's a great one. In the spring, you get this wonderful color pattern in the flowers, and then it is a nice evergreen ground cover much of the rest of the year. And again, with a little bit of irrigation, a wonderful place that's going to keep a nice, well-vegetated landscape right around your home. It's a little slow on the uptake here. Okay. Pacific Coast Iris is another great one that we recommend in fire-safe landscapes. These are when the flowers die back, there'll be great spring color in the flowers in the spring. And then once they die back, the green portions that are left above ground are slow to ignite. They still have a lot of water in them. And then as they die back, you can just take it through with a weed eater or something else and sort of knock them back down to the ground until the next season. So it's a good one to use in a fire-safe landscape because it can be trimmed back so heavily. And finally, the last one is Seaside Daisy. This is another great ground cover. The leaves are semi-succulent, and it has these prolific blooms in the springtime. And if you add a little bit of water, they'll bloom into the summer. And just even when they're not blooming, it's a beautiful ground cover plant that will stay and is a very fire-resistant plant in your landscape. So another great one to consider that provides habitat value year-round. With that, I think I'm going to finish up here, and we'll let we'll turn this back over to Scott.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. You see, we've got some tools for you from Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. We do want to get to the Q&A. You have so many great questions. We've got one more fantastic speaker, Anne-Marie Parkinson, the Executive Director of Santa Barbara Firesafe Council, who has been in that role since 2021. Anne-Marie has a master's degree from the Bren School of Environmental Management, and Anne-Marie's been a really great partner to work with. And without further ado, I'll turn it over.
Yes, Scott. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm just going to talk a bit about the Fires Council, programs and services that we offer to help communities become more prepared and safe for wildfires, and talk a bit about insurance, because you can't really talk about fire without bringing up insurance. I'm sure that's why a lot of people are here today. So our organization is a 501c3. We have 28 years of experience working to promote wildfire safety through education action across Santa Barbara County. And we do that through a multitude of programs, which will slowly appear on the next slide. We just got started with staff a little over 4 years ago. We have grown from a small budget to now multi-million dollars, helping out communities with a chipping program, with grazing. If anyone's been to San Marcos Foothills Preserve, sometimes the sheep on there and goats are through one of our grants, the Caligiure grants. We also help out low-income residents with home hardening and defensible space, recognizing wildfire is a shared risk and we're only as safe as our neighbor. And so recognizing some people just don't have the capacity and finances to invest in their homes or properties to make them safe, and that puts the rest of the neighborhood at risk. And so we can go in there with some grant funds and help them out. And we do have a really big focus on education. We talk with a lot of community members, and what always comes up and just how they're asking questions is they need education to understand what's a risk, how to mitigate it, what can they do. And so we have a big program focused on community outreach, especially focusing on connecting with practitioners in the field. And it's something I'll talk about in a second. And I'll talk a bit about two programs that we have. One is for home evaluations, and those are free for the community. You can sign up on our website at sbfiresafecouncil.org through programs at the top of our page. And then drop down is home evaluations. We'll have a staff member come out to your home, spend 30, 60 minutes just walking around your house with you, explaining features of your house that are already fire safe, but also what you have to continue to do with maintenance or retrofits to improve the safety of your structure, maintenance you have to do for your landscaping to make it safe for yourself to leave, to protect your structure, make it safe for EMS to be able to access your property. And at the end, you get a nice report that'll outline everything that he's talked about. And nice thing about having someone there to talk to you is Recognizing there's a couple different ways to do retrofits for your structure based off of different budgets and static values, and we can help walk through some residents on the various options that there are. Also on our websites, if you do not want to wait for home evaluation or want to continue to learn more about the various retrofit opportunities, Matthew had mentioned this in his talk. At the very end, we do have a wildfire home hardening guide at the top of our websites. And clicking on that, it goes over all the different features of a structure. What are risks to those features? What are retrofit actions organized from cheapest to most expensive? What are maintenance options? And it lays out some codes depending on what cities you're in. Just recognizing building officials also don't understand the building code sometimes. So it was really hard to make that. We try to do as well as we could, making it clear to residents about what they need a permit for and what they don't. But it is still a pretty confusing item to lay out clearly for everyone. And the second program I wanted to focus a little bit more on is Firewise USA, something our supervisor mentioned earlier. This is a program, it's a national program. So we don't run Firewise. We're not Firewise. We are the Fire Council. I think it's a little confusing with people. It's just a program that we use to engage with residents. It provides a framework for communities to get organized, to understand their fire risks, and to work together to make a plan to mitigate that risk over time. And our staff are super involved in the process, helping communities through the process, helping them organize community engagement days, helping get the fire departments and other agencies connected with the community to provide education, resources, services. And the more we know about communities and what they need to be safe, it informs how we write our grants. And so if we get to know you and your needs, I'm more likely to include it in the grant funds that we're writing. And so we started off with 0 fire risk communities 4 years ago. We're now up to 44 across the county. And if you aren't sure if you are in a fire risk community, we can go to our website at sbfiresafecouncil.org/firewise-USA and scroll down near the bottom of the page. And we have a nice map there that if you put in your address, it'll let you know if you're in a fire risk community or not. If you want to learn more, be involved, our program manager's contact information is on that page. And she can put you in contact with your Firewise leader, help get you the certificates they can show to your insurance companies if you are in a Firewise community or not. There is an insurance benefit for being in Firewise for some insurance companies. Fair Plan is one of them. I'm now hearing they're giving, sounds like a pretty consistent 10% discount on your fire policy if you are in a Firewise USA community. And last I mentioned, we have a big role in putting together new education curriculum for the community, but we also recognize we cannot just educate homeowners on home hardening and defensible space. We have to also provide education for practitioners, people that are going to people's homes to make retrofits, to do landscape maintenance, who are selling homes to new residents in our community, working with the tourism industry. So right now we're focusing on a firescaping certificate for landscapers and landscape designers and architects, and also home hardening. So for contractors, handymen, we're working with Botanic Garden on the firescaping certificates, and same with also working with the California Native Plant Society. And the fourth activity we're working on with UC Davis, it's called a serious game. It's just a fun, interactive way to get communities thinking about evacuation in their area. Recognizing fire is not a static hazard that happens in a very convenient time. It can happen at any time. And so this game helps getting people thinking about evacuation, more dynamic situation under multiple different scenarios, and really hope to open up that conversation or that door to have those conversations about evacuation with your neighbors and with your family. So we look forward to bringing that out into more communities. And then talking about insurance, what is going on there besides rates just pricing people out of living in California? So this is a graph showing global insured losses from natural disasters since 1970. And these prices have been adjusted for inflation. And right off the bat, you can see the cost of these disasters has gone up. 1970s to 1990. Paying out under $10 billion a year, and now 2010, 2020, paying out on average by around $40 billion. So 4 times the amount reinsurers are paying out for natural disasters. So whether or not you believe in climate change, numbers for show disasters are just getting more intense, more frequent, and it's costing the insurance companies a lot of money that then we all have to pay. And then zoning in a little bit more on 1990 through the 2020. And so looking at the dark blue, we have severe convective storms, so hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding in light blue, wildfires in the green, and then other hazards, secondary effects in orange and yellow. And between 1990 and 2010, you can see probably just about 2 years of wildfire that really stick out. So 1991 was the Oakland Hills Fire. 2023 was the Cedar Fire down in San Diego. And so in those decades, there's once in a decade event that insurance companies realized fire was costing a little bit of money. It was more of a blimp on the radar for them. They didn't really think about it. They were just worried about hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding. That's where their losses were coming from. And then we get to 2017. And for first time, wildfires are a pretty big loss for them. And they're trying to wait to see, is this just another once in a decade experience and everything will go back to normal and fire's not a big loss for them? And then 2018 happened. And that was the first time in history that wildfire losses surpassed losses from hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods. And that year is what absolutely shook the insurance industry and really caused them to reassess. And they lost out on billions of dollars in just 2 years. They freaked out. And that's what caused them to just pull out and want to reassess their risk and figure out what is going on. And what they learned from looking at this map, this map shows homeowners insurance rates on average across the nation. If a certain state is paying above the national average, as they are in pink, and if they're paying below the national average, which are the ones in green. And so the ones in pink are areas where you have the hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding. And then California, surprisingly, which I didn't know until starting to talk with insurance groups, is Californians are paying some of the lowest rates in the nation, which is shocking because living in California is super expensive. And so insurance companies realized that they were not accurately pricing their risk for home insurance in the States. So back in the year 1970s, homes were selling for $50,000 and now they're up to $1.5 million. And so your $1,000 insurance rate is not going to cover that multi-million-dollar house plus all its contents. And they're just realizing their risk is severely underassessed here. And they're working with modelers to try and understand what is our risk, how do we work with scientists and groups to, if we do home hardening in these retrofits, how does that then affect the rates for their homes? How much of a discount do we give if someone goes from a wooden fence to a metal fence? They don't know that yet, because we don't know. It's really hard to assess how a fire burns through a urban area and what certain features, how that affects the ultimate risk of a home. And so they're still figuring that out, and that's what's taking a bit of time for them to come in and provide more reasonable rates. So the first slide was from a talk Professor of Economics from the Brent School at UCSB gave. And it was a really great talk. He talked about insurance in a way that I hadn't heard most people talk about it. He really talked about it in a way that makes the general public better understand what's going on in terms of zip code price modeling, model-based risk models. So he was an excellent speaker. So if you want to watch that presentation, which I highly recommend, it's up here on our website. If you scroll down a little bit, it's on the featured presentations page. It's Wildfire Insurance by Andrew Plantica. But so where is insurance going? I know people don't want to hear this, but they probably already know it. Rates are not going back to they used to be. And I recognize it is very, very hard to be on a fixed income or move to Santa Barbara or California in general and expect a certain insurance rate. And then in a few years, just to have that double, triple, or go up tenfold is really hard for people. We do hope that insurance companies will start to recognize if you have certain retrofits in your house, that equates to a certain amount of risk, and that should more accurately reflect in the rates people are getting. But again, they're not there yet, but they are working on it. And second is we have a collaborator who used to be who's now a retired CAL FIRE chief, who is contracted by reinsurers, insurance companies to come talk to them about wildfire and risk and incident command, so they can understand what's going on, because they don't want to pull out of these states. Then they loses the money, but so does losing $50 billion in 1 year. So they're trying to understand, how do we price in a way that makes them money and makes the insurance market more stable. And so he came away from that meeting. He had a meeting with, I think, the CEO of Mercury a couple months ago, and he came away saying he felt very hopeful talking with them. He said a lot of the conversation focused on talking about parcel level risk. So insurance companies recognize you can't just base risk at a zip code scale. So if they're starting to talk about looking at individual homes, that is a really good sign. That will take some time, though. It has to do a little training session with field crews, have to install systems and workflows. So it'll take some time to get there, but the fact that they're talking about it is a sign in the right direction. But we're having problems now. We can't just wait around. So what can we do now? And I really want to touch on what everyone else, I think, has already touched on, which is what we're seeing. It's not a wildfire problem. Fire is very natural in our environments, in our communities. But what we're seeing is it's a home ignition problem. We're losing tens of thousands of structures. It's not the fire's fault. It's that we are building homes that are essentially fuel beds for these flames and embers. And they're just burning through our communities. So what we need to do is start looking at hardening our homes. And so we always recommend working from the house out. Let's not worry about a fuel break half a mile away and all over there. Fuel break is not going to save your house. It is a tool in the toolbox. It helps with firefighter protection, so they can go out and do more defensive actions around the communities. But what homeowners need to do, what they need to focus on, is their house. And so we recommend signing up for home evaluation. On our hardening page, we have a list of 10 low-cost retrofits people can work towards that have a really big impact on your home safety. Working on defensive space, that Steve went over. One thing that's not on there that I'm happy Laura Capson mentioned is signing up for ready SBC alerts. Fourth is review your insurance policy. Most people don't know that they're not fully insured. I think the stat is about 2/3 of people are not fully insured. And so what happens if a fire comes through and you lose your house and your contents, you aren't able to be back. And so if you can imagine, we lose 1,000 homes and 2/3 of people can't build back. We've lost our sense of community. It'll take a lot longer for us to heal. So really take a good look at that. And we recommend signing up for newsletters from United Policyholders. They are a nonprofit that specializes in insurance education, tips, resources, and help for people. They're not funded by the insurance groups. They're privately funded, and they are a really excellent group. And then fourth is signing up to become a Fireways USA community or getting involved in your current Fireways USA community. Laura Capps touched on it fantastically we have to work with our neighbors to become more fire safe. We have to make a plan for our elderly neighbor who doesn't have a phone or doesn't know how to get out. They can't drive. Our neighbor is going to do that. We can't rely on the police department. They are excellent. But when there's a raging wildfire going on, they are busy and communication can get lost. So you have to really rely on your neighbors and get to know them. Research has shown communities that are more resilient, are more engaged and have higher connection within their neighborhoods, or more resilient to disasters and recover faster. And while there are insurance benefits for becoming Firewise, that's not the point. We're going through the program, and it really is connecting with neighbors, because eventually that could save someone's life. And so I have a video here that was from the LA fires that kind of just touches on that point. So I can just put a link to that in the chat. It is really impactful, and highly recommend people really to watch that and understand the purpose of the Fireways USA program. We can go to the next slide, which is just a thank you and how to get in contact with us. All right, thanks, Scott.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Wow, so much information. Thanks to all of the presenters for all of the information that's been shared. We've got 19 minutes now. Over 50 questions were asked between the Q&A and the chat. So we're going to try to consolidate some of them and hit some of the most common themes. So the first one I'll send over to Captain Olmstead, and generally a lot of people were interested in this balance between prevention and suppression, and how does the agency sort of think about giving resources to the prevention side of things versus having all of the resources go to fighting the actual fire. So this idea of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and how do fire departments think about that balance of resources?
Well, no, that's a good question, and it is right in regards to, and you've seen it play out throughout, the state and other areas. We just do not have enough resources to truly protect all the houses when we have these large scale events. Plus, you add on the fact that you have these huge wind events and this mass of vegetation fuel burning. There's very limited we can do in that regards of suppression, in regards to really, it goes back to prevention and really looking at what the homeowner and the community at large have done to prep for these things. And what we find is the preparation really pays tenfold in regards to life safety as well as property prevention, and really looking at thinning out. And that's why such project is what the Firesafe Council does in regards to grant programs for fuel reduction plays a huge role. And really then there's the fire department across the board in the state have a lot of resources in regards to education and allowing people to do the research and provide forums such as this so that you can look at what's works. Again, one thing to look at is really 2008 is when the state really started looking at construction features and really put it into the code in regards to what is known as our 7A, our California Building Code 7A compliant for the wildland interface areas. So most peoples and most homes are pre-2008. So they're not really built to today's standards. So it's really in everyone's interest to look at it and do the minor things as you can in getting it to a good point in regards to your defensible space. You're looking at your zone 0 clearance, your non-combustible surfacing of the structure, and just all fire departments, and especially with inside Santa Barbara County, the cities and stuff, we have defensible space programs. We have, I am one of the supervisors right now of our planning and engineering section where we talk about new construction. And so there's plenty of resources out there, such as this forum to show where people can do the work, because I've been to those fires where you look at and you have house A that has done some work in it. It takes only, say, 20 minutes of our time to get it ready for almost a defend in place, versus house B that hasn't done any, and it would take way too much time for us to really get it in a state because they had years to prep it to begin with, and we just can't do it in that amount of time. So hopefully that answered your questions in that regards.
Thank you, Captain Olmstead. And I would just like to comment generally about all the questions. We are keeping a log of all of them. So if you don't feel like your question has been answered, we're going to be filing through these over the next little bit here, and we'll try to make sure to get resources out to answer questions. But moving on to the next question, I'll direct this one to Steve. And there's been a lot of interest in this idea of plant lists, questions about maintaining our landscapes. What does well hydrated mean? What are some key considerations? And finally, there seems to be some inconsistency across municipalities about defensible space zones and some of those distances. And what are your recommendations for homeowners as they consider all of these variables?
Great question. So, for starters, there is not a uniform plant list that's been established. Most of the lists that are out there that are either recommending plants or discouraging them were just based off of, they asked some arborists or experts in other areas, and those lists got populated with in a very unscientific way, and are oftentimes not very useful for the purposes of what you really want to do, which is protect your home. The garden is in the process of using the characteristics that we talked about earlier, as well as others, to identify trees and plants that can be in different areas of the landscape. And what you might, if you were going to put a plant that is not ideal for that area of the landscape, what kind of maintenance you're going to be signing up for in order to keep your home fire safe. That's a project we're working on with the county and with the city fire department, as well as the city of Santa Barbara Parks Department. So we will be having some materials within the next year that everyone will be able to refer to, that will have a list of 100 to 200 plants that will identify where they can be in your landscape and what maintenance they might require. In terms of well hydrated, for most plants, depending on what type of plant it is, if it's a succulent, oftentimes it may not require much, if any, irrigation in order to stay well hydrated. In other plant species, many California native plants will go what's called drought dormant in the summertime. That means their leaves and other materials will begin to die back without a little bit of supplemental water. Oftentimes, this doesn't require a formal irrigation in your landscape. It could be once every other week with a hose is enough to keep that plant vigorously growing and not dying back. Or if you want to allow your plant to die back in your landscape, it does mean you may want to trim it back and remove that material before that, in the heat of the summer, before we get into the really scary fall high fire season. So there are things you can do if you don't want to irrigate your landscape. Adding water to landscape is one of the ways to keep plants from burning. If you're not going to do that, then you may think about removing more of that material so that if an ember does land in that area, it's not going to be setting anything on fire. So there's a number of different approaches you can take to that.
Thank you, Steve. Keeping it moving, we just have a time for one or two more questions. One that came up quite a bit, and maybe I'll direct this to Matthew, is about the idea of fire-resistant paints. Do you have any thoughts about whether that is a good treatment for outside structures?
Yeah, I do have some thoughts, and I'm definitely not anti-intumescent paint, but I think there's a few good reasons why intumescent paint doesn't show up on the home hardening short lists, like we had talked about earlier today. I think it can be useful in certain situations, especially where you have to keep wood fencing or wood elements on or close to the home. But there are some fallibilities with it that kind of make it a little more unreliable. One, the main thing is that it just has to be maintained and reapplied really often to be effective as it needs to be. So I think people tend to, like we all do, we forget or we lose track of it and we don't maintain, just like we do with our gutters or whatnot. So we don't want to rely on the coating. And sometimes it can be applied incorrectly, and sometimes it can be applied too infrequently, and it just shouldn't be used as kind of the best, kind of like first best practice option. And I know that it would be awesome if you can just slap it on and it'd be good for 5 or 10 years, but that's just not the case. So I think appropriately used and maintained really well, it can be effective. But it wasn't on the top of the list, and I think for good reason. But I don't think it should be totally discounted either. There's a couple other things. It can be a little harder to get. It can be quite costly if you're going to be using it on a kind of a full structure, full implementation. And it's kind of a gnarly product. So it's got to be, you got to take some consideration when if you're doing it yourself, or if your painter or installer is doing it, they should be masked up. And yeah, so it's a good question. And I know that we've maybe in the past been sold it as like the silver bullet, or like the thing that's going to save us perhaps, but I just don't think it should be relied on as the first line of defense. But I think appropriately used, it can be effective. So there's more to it than that, but I think that's my initial thinking on that.
And would you say just generally that also applies to things like the foams and some of the sprinkler products that you see out there, or is it a little more case by case?
Yeah, I think the large format like foam and exterior sprinkler mitigation systems, we're just starting to see like the first wave of those installed, and it's typically on larger homes in the wild and urban interface. They say they work, and the data seems to be there, and the installations seem clean. It seems like it works on a large scale, but Santa Barbara hasn't had that infrastructure installed on dozens and dozens or hundreds of homes. We haven't like seen that work yet. But I think it has worked in other places, and it can be really effective. It's also quite costly, and so it might not be an option for everybody. But it's also a type of thing where your insurance company in certain cases might be recommending or requiring that you have that, and if you live in an extremely high fire area. So these are some of the really complex decisions that homeowners in our city, in our region, are going to have to, or are facing right now. And it's really hard. It's really hard because the costs are big and the implications are big, and you getting insurance renewal is there or not getting it. So it's complex, and I feel for everybody that's kind of going through that on their own individual structures. Yeah.
Thank you. And we have time for one more question. I'd like to direct it to all of the panelists, but since we haven't yet heard from Anne Marie in this Q&A, I'm wondering, Anne Marie, if you have thoughts about the non-homeowners or the people who don't have total control over the landscape, people living in HOAs, people who are renting, people who are in city and county owned properties. What do you think are some of the tools they can leverage to advocate for fire resiliency in these communities, in these situations? Again, all the panelists, I welcome your responses. Anne Marie, if you don't mind chiming in first. And I'm also going to put up a slide here because we do have some sponsors for this presentation, and we want to thank them. So I'll be working on that during the response.
No, it's a great question, and one I don't think I have a great answer, but it's something we're still discussing and debating. Like, how do we encourage renters to be involved in part of the solutions of home hardening and defensive space? And it's hard because a lot of people are scared to contact their landlords and talk about this because they fear the rates are going to go up. And that's a big deal for a lot of people. At the same time, if your house burns down, then you don't have a place to live. And then a lot of people don't want to take on the work themselves because it's not their property. And sometimes rental contracts don't allow them to even do any work on the property anyway. So it's hard. I think it kind of depends too. If someone feels comfortable talking with their landlord and connecting with them, that's great. And I can encourage them to share some of the outreach material from ourselves, from other groups about home hardening defensive space, and say, hey, it's a great talk and learned about home hardening defensive space, and would really love to continue living here and supporting this house, but I fear there's some things that's need a little bit of work. But here's these like 10 low cost retrofits that can very cheaply be done. I want to support you as the homeowner, my landlord, to protect this property. And for people who are really hesitant to reach out, or people that don't even know who to reach out to, because sometimes it's a big management company and they're not listening as much. It's really hard. I think that's on the homeowner to decide if they want to risk that. But at least on our end, we're trying to connect with landlord companies such as Wolf & Associates and some other larger ones, and want to have a sit down with them and just learn what they're thinking in terms of wildfire and risk to their properties that they manage. Just get a thought about where they're at with that and how we can support them in doing home hardening and eventual space on their properties, because they do have a big impact. There's a lot of people in Santa Barbara, and I forgot the number, but it's a good amount. So I'll pass it off to anyone else who wants to chime in. Maybe Laura Capps, as one of our supervisors, has something to add.
I'm not sure Laura's still on the. Yeah. Well, thank you, Anne-Marie. Anybody else have any parting shots, final thoughts before we say thank you and release everybody for the evening?
Yeah, I just had a quick thing is, that comes up a lot, and I get answered in regards to like foams and fire sprinkler for the exterior of the building. And like Matt said, there is some benefit to the foam itself. However, one of the issues is really the use of foam on the exterior of the structures. It starts to break down once you put it on. It's not a long lasting application where you can spray it and it's good for the whole season. So part of the problem is when do you apply it? How do you apply it? Are you staying someplace to where now you're putting yourself in harm because you're trying to apply this stuff? And those are some of the issues that are associated with those types of things. When you have fire sprinklers or sprinklers on the exterior of your residence, are you depleting the water system as a whole because you turn it on a day or 2 days before the fire comes, and now the water is actually being depleted and can't be used for other areas for firefighting? So there's a lot of broader issues associated with those things. And there's like, well, I can do it remotely, but a lot of times the power goes out in these areas. So you're looking at, there are some small applications where it might be warranted, but you really do got to look at, is it going to last? And then just to follow up on, if you're a renter or so, there are requirements for landowners or landlords. If they're inside what's known as the fire hazard severity zones, they are mandated to provide defensible space for their structures. So if you are renting in a place that has that is inside one of the very high fire hazard severity zones, you could contact the local fire department and say, hey, can you do an inspection? And part of that inspection would be, then we would send notification to the property owner of saying, hey, these things need to be done because the area you're in. You should not. Just because you're renting does not mean that you should not be safe. And so please reach out to the local fire department or so if you need to have that extra support.
Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you to all of the presenters. Thank you. You see here sponsors and partners who are involved. Thank you to Regina for the translation. And thank you to all of you. We still have almost 200 people here right now as we're wrapping up. We topped out at 300 for this, and clearly an important subject. And we're just so grateful for everybody's participation, and stay tuned for more. Have a great evening, everybody.